Hello, students. This is a biology recording for Tuesday, December 14th. My name is Ms. Rodriguez, and we will continue to review for final exams. Today, we will be covering ecological succession, environmental change, and adaptations. So just starting off with some notes here. So guys, remember that succession is when you have a population that is interacting to form some type of change in that community. Now, if you don't remember what a community was, remember in the previous video, we mentioned that a community is a group of individuals living under the same area, but they're all different species. Like, for example, the classroom example that I gave you. So if I have the teacher, the students, let's say I have some fishes in the classroom, some plants in the classroom, that would be a community because we're all different species. So with that said, populations and those communities, we need to adapt in order for us to survive those changing conditions. So remember also that succession, guys, what tells you here is an orderly change in the makeup of a community over time. So we have some vocabulary words that we need to cover before we cover succession. So anytime that we're going to be starting up a new community, guys, we need to have our pioneer species or a pioneer community. So this is the first type of plants or first type of living things that are going to show up after the natural disaster or the event that caused the ecological succession, whether that be primary or secondary. So in a pioneer community, usually you're going to start in a very harsh environment, meaning there might not be enough soil or no soil at all. But as time passes on, you're going to have an increase in biomass, or you're going to have an increase of living things coming into the community or the environment. Because you're barely starting out and you're starting to rebuild your community or your environment, you're going to have inefficient energy consumption. We're not going to have enough energy being made. So we're going to have a lot of energy being taken in because those plants or those living things that are starting up the communities after some type of event that it has occurred, they're going to use up a lot of energy, guys, and then a little bit of energy is going to be being made because we're barely starting up to rebuild our community. We're going to have low species diversity, meaning we're not going to have a lot of different types of plants and animals. We might have maybe like one or two, or depending on the community that we have, we're going to have a very low amount of different types of living things. And we're going to have a lot of changes or fluctuations that are very common. Now, once my community is back to normal, this goes for primary and secondary succession. We call that a climax community, if you don't remember that. So it's going to have a very favorable environment, meaning that it's going to have enough energy. It's going to be able to support all types of living things. We're going to have enough biomass, and again, because we have different types of animals, different types of plants, insects, all different types of life now in my beautiful climax community. There's going to be enough energy. We're going to have enough nutrient cycling that goes back again to your carbon and your nitrogen cycle. So they're going to be running smoothly now that we have our climax community that is stable. We're going to have a lot of species diversity, or what we called in the last video, biodiversity. So I'm going to have a lot of different types of living things in that community, and they're all going to be supporting one another. So you can think of that big community as a big food web that is made out of food chain. So again, that relates back to our previous video as well. And our fluctuations or our changes are going to be uncommon. Why? Because I have now my stable community that has different types of living things or a lot of biodiversity. So they're helping one another be in homeostasis or balance. So there shouldn't be enough, or there shouldn't be any changes unless another major disaster or natural disaster occurs. So going into primary succession, remember, guys, your primary succession usually happens because of a volcanic eruption, or it could be a glacier that has wiped out in a community. So this occurs in a newly formed area where no organisms existed before. Why? Because a volcano wiped it out, or a glacier wiped it out. So remember, guys, with primary succession, you're not going to be left with any soil. And we need soil to start up life, to start up my plant growth. And then why do I need plants? Well, I need plants for oxygen for us as well. We need plants to sustain our community or environment, and also to bring in a lot of different types of living things, such as animal, insects, other plants, right? And we all rely on one another. So let's say a volcanic eruption happens. So what are the steps? So in step number one, you have your pioneer species, or the ones that are first to show up to start up the community again. So this includes lichens and mosses that are going to be growing on rocks or colonizing on rocks. So once my lichens start to dissolve that's called weathering, they're going to start to form soil. So slowly but surely, we're going to start to build up our community again. As lichens or those mosses die, they're going to add organic matter or more carbon into the soil. So that's going to start to bring in more different types of living things. The soil then becomes rich, and it's going to be able to support small animals, little insects, more plants. So slowly but surely, we're going to be bringing in more different types of life or more biodiversity. So that barren rock can become a terrestrial ecosystem, and eventually we're going to end up with our climax community, a big, beautiful community. Now remember, primary succession, guys, it doesn't happen from one day to the next. This can happen, let's say 50 to 2,000 years, right? So it can take many years for that community that was destroyed by a volcanic eruption or a glacier to go back to normal. Now, secondary succession is a little bit different. So remember that secondary succession, there is some type of natural disaster that occurs that changes the community. But remember, with this one, guys, it does start with soil. So this one happens at a faster rate. So primary succession, the one that I covered right now, it'll take longer because there's no soil being started up with that community. Now, secondary succession is going to go a lot faster because you have your soil that's in place already, even though there was a disaster. So secondary succession occurs after a pre-existing climax community has been partially or completely destroyed. So it can happen because of natural disasters, let's say deforestation, where your land is clear for harvest, or let's say construction and building houses there, or there's a store going to be built there. And remember, your soil is already present, already set in place. So this, of course, brings changes to your ecosystems. These populations, of course, depend on one another. There's going to be changes that affect one population, and it can destroy the entire ecosystem. You have survival of species. They must adapt to changes and limiting factors. So those limiting factors include food, water, space, and this is definitely going to affect biodiversity. So these changes to ecosystems, guys, this applies to both primary and secondary succession. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to this quick video just to kind of review the things that we discussed on primary and secondary succession, and also fill in the gaps on anything that I missed during my little lecture here. Here we go.
Ecological succession is a series of changes in a community where new populations of organisms replace existing populations. Ecological succession takes place after volcanic eruptions and glacier activity, as well as after natural disasters or human disturbance such as farming. Pioneer organisms are the first organisms to colonize an area where there are no other living things, such as the bare rock left behind after a volcanic eruption, or a recently burned forest. Lichens are an example of a pioneer species. Primary succession is the colonization of bare rock by pioneer species. Pioneer species are generally autotrophs that are able to survive in harsh environmental conditions. Pioneer populations form a community during primary succession. These organisms modify the microenvironment surrounding them, changing the biotic and abiotic factors of the ecosystem. Secondary succession is a sequence of community changes that take place when an ecosystem is disrupted by a natural disaster or human disturbance. This type of succession occurs where soil is already in place. Ecological succession will occur as a series of communities until a final stable community is reached. This final community is called the climax community. The climax community can remain intact for hundreds or even thousands of years. The biodiversity, or the number of different species of an ecosystem, will increase as succession progresses until the climax community is reached. Species diversity then levels off due to competition among organisms. Ecological succession can occur in both terrestrial and aquatic habitats.
Alrighty, guys. So that was just covering succession. Now I'm going to go ahead and play a very quick video. It's only 3 minutes, talking about environmental sustainability, guys. So this is going to be covering how human impact affects our environment. So this includes, for example, when we create a lot of pollution, when we have a lot of deforestation, things that affect the environment, or how we affect the environment, mostly for the negative, not really for the positive. So let's go ahead and take a look. Alrighty, guys, we're gonna watch one more video. We're gonna be covering adaptations. I'm gonna go ahead and play that for you.
Long ago, people began domesticating wolves, gradually transforming them from wild animals into hunting partners and companions. Through the domestication process, wolves adapted to live with humans. Though a happy, friendly dog is a far cry from a fierce wolf, dogs still possess many of the adaptations that allow wolves to thrive in the wild. Welcome to Moo Moo Math and Science and Adaptations. Adaptations are traits that increase or decrease the fitness of an organism. In other words, adaptations help or hinder the ability of an organism to survive. Adaptations are genetically controlled and therefore can be passed on to successive generations. Let's take a look at some examples of adaptations from different types of organisms. Desert plants live in harsh environments where water is scarce. As a result, desert plants have many adaptations that enable them to collect or retain water efficiently. For example, some desert plants have short root systems that spread out over wide areas to collect as much water as possible during rainstorms. Most desert plants have waxy leaves that retain water inside the plant and prevent the water from evaporating in the hot sun. The human body also presents many adaptations. For example, humans have a large number of sweat glands that allow us to cool off and survive in hot environments. In high altitude locations where oxygen levels are low, it appears that humans' bodies can evolve over time to use more oxygen more efficiently. While most people would feel sick in the Tibetan mountains due to lack of oxygen, the bodies of the Tibetan people are oxygen converting machines. A euglena is a single-celled protist. These little protists adapted to become mixotrophs, meaning they can act as an autotroph and a heterotroph. Autotrophs are capable of producing their own food from inorganic substances. Euglena are photoautotrophs, which means they have chloroplasts that allow them to carry out photosynthesis and make food from sunlight. Heterotrophs, on the other hand, must eat other organisms for food. Euglenas are also classified as heterotrophs because they feed on living organisms such as bacteria or algae. Sloths are famous for moving slow and hanging out in trees. They also have many adaptations that increase their fitness. For example, they have an extremely slow metabolism. Sloth's diet primarily consists of leaves. Leaves do not contain much energy, but a sloth's slow metabolism enables the sloth to store energy from its food for long periods of time. In addition, leaves are hard to digest, but sloths have a complex stomach that breaks down and ferments leaves efficiently. Owls are very successful birds of prey with many helpful adaptations. Here's a brief list. Their feathers are designed for silent flight. Their eyes are full of rods, which gives them extraordinarily good night vision. They have tufts that resemble twigs and branches. And finally, they have the ability to turn their heads 270 degrees in each direction. You can't sneak up on an owl. Quick reminder, an adaptation is any inheritable trait that increases an organism's ability to survive and reproduce in its environment. Cuttlefish are masters of camouflage. They practice adaptive camouflage, which means they can change their color and texture based on their surroundings. Cuttlefish use specialized skin cells called chromatophores that act as color pixels on their skin and change the color and design of their body. Tarantulas have the ability to use hairs on their abdomen as a defense mechanism. When tarantulas are attacked or feel threatened, they kick their back legs, sending the hairs on their abdomen hurtling towards their attacker. If successful, these barbed hairs will hurt and irritate the predator's eyes and nose. Possums have the ability to play dead. When attacked, they will act and even smell like a dead animal by laying on the ground and releasing a smelly fluid from their backside. Possum appears stiff and lifeless, which hopefully discourage the attackers. So there we go, some adaptations that increase.
Alrighty, guys. So just remember that adaptations, we have 3 types. There is the structural adaptation, behavioral adaptation, and your physiological adaptations, and they help you survive. So good luck today, guys. Again, this is recording for Tuesday, December 14th, and we'll see you guys very soon. Have a great day, guys.